Our passage this week is found in John chapter 15. I am the true vine. And so often in the passages, he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. He repeats it, I'm the vine, you the branches. He encourages us to stay connected to the vine, and that is so important. And when I think of this passage, I think about a young man who's still in our church, but I think back to the time when he was 18 years old. He was just finishing high school. He was working after school and working in the summer, saving money. And he came to me and said, I really want to go to Cuba. I would like to. I said, oh, Jacob, there's such a place for you. We would love for you to go. So he went with a large group of people. It was the largest team of people who ever went to Holguín, Cuba. And it was 15 people. And I had mentioned to the group that we had a minister who was going to go with us, but wasn't able to go. And if anyone in the group would like to share, Pastor Aramis loved for someone in our group to always preach, and no one had come forward yet. And so after our meeting, Jacob needed to get a suitcase in order to pack and take to Cuba. So we went up to the Cuba room, got that suitcase, and he was so sweet and so kind. And he said, I heard you say you needed someone to preach. And he said, I could talk to Brother John and I could talk to him about some passages and get some ideas from him. And if you need someone to preach, he said, I will preach. And I knew that was something that Jacob was really extending himself to say that was not something he was necessarily comfortable doing, but it was like Jacob was accepting the call. Because I knew from spending time around Jacob in the meetings we had, he was a very sensitive person to what God wanted him to do. And he felt that God wanted him to go to Cuba and experience a mission trip. He felt that God wanted him to give to others. I was so appreciative of him stepping outside of his comfort zone and saying, I'll do this. I'll do this for the group. I'll do this for our church. I'll represent us well. And he did. I want to tell you that the night before he spoke, a group of us adults were in the sanctuary of the church, just spending time on a Saturday night, observing what Cubans do in the church. And Jacob came in and he walked down to the front pew and he sat and he knelt and he was praying. And after a while, I asked the other adults if they would go down front with me and let's gather around Jacob and pray for him, because I knew he was thinking of his sermon the next day. And so we went down and we gathered around and we prayed for Jacob. And the next morning, we went to an 8 o'clock service. Jacob was there. And then after that service, we went over to the parsonage for a meal. When we walked in the door, it was a full spread on the table. Fresh squeezed juice from various types of fruit in Cuba, fresh bread, butter, eggs. And Jacob was behind me as we walked through the door. In a very soft voice, I heard Jacob say, this is going to be hard. And we sat down. And Jacob did not eat. And I realized Jacob had planned to fast. So then we went to the service, the second service of the morning. Jacob got up to preach. And I noticed he was talking through the scriptures. He was preaching. He was sharing his thoughts. And the next thing I observed, Jacob had gotten completely outside of his comfort zone. He had become so relaxed in what he was doing, trusting God to use him that morning. And Jacob was walking down the center aisle of the church preaching with the interpreter right behind him interpreting. And Jacob was just walking among the people. It was beautiful. His parents were back here in Jonesboro watching on Facebook, and his mom told me we just began to cry when we saw God using our son that way. It's a powerful thing to be connected to the vine, because he says in John 15, apart from me, you can do nothing. In our own strength, we can't do anything. We can try, but we don't get very far. But look how far Jacob got. Jacob Scarlett was so willing to say, God, use me. He was so willing to raise his hand and say, I'll do that. I'll do what needs to be done. I'll do this for the team. And he did it beautifully because he was trusting Jesus.